My name is Isabella, and before I tell you about the heartbreak that changed me, I need to tell you about the emptiness that has always lived inside me. I grew up in a house where silence was louder than love. My parents weren't cruel, not in the way people imagine cruelty, but they were distant, busy, cold. My mother was always lost in her own world, and my father only seemed to notice me when I did something wrong. So most of the time, I stayed invisible. Invisible at the dinner table, invisible in my own home. I remember being a little girl sitting by the window, pressing my forehead against the cold glass and watching other families outside, laughing together, walking hand in hand, sharing warmth. I used to whisper to myself, "Why not me? Why not us?" But no answer ever came. In school, I wasn't much different. I wasn't the loud one or the funny one or the beautiful one everyone wanted to be around. I was just Isabella, the quiet girl with too many thoughts and not enough words. I kept a notebook where I wrote down everything I couldn't say out loud. Pages filled with questions like, do I matter? Will anyone ever really see me? But no matter how many pages I filled, the emptiness stayed. Sometimes I would pretend. I would laugh at jokes I didn't find funny, join conversations I didn't belong in, smile even when I felt like breaking. Because maybe, just maybe, if I pretended hard enough, someone would believe it. Maybe I would believe it. But pretending is heavy. And at night, when I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the truth would always come back. That I was alone, that nobody saw me, that even in a crowded room, I was invisible. I think that's why when I met him years later, it hurt so much more. Because for the first time in my life, someone actually saw me. Not just the surface, not just the fake smiles, but the real me. And losing him would become the kind of pain I never thought I could survive. When I turned 17, everything changed. My parents decided we were moving to a new city. For them, it was just another transfer, another shift, another chapter in their endless routine. But for me, it felt like the end of the little world I had built around my silence. I thought maybe things would stay the same in this new place. That I would remain the invisible girl, hiding in corners, writing my thoughts in notebooks no one would ever read. But life had other plans. On my very first day at the new school, I met him, Ethan. He wasn't like anyone I had ever known. He carried a kind of warmth that filled the room. He had this effortless way of making people laugh, of making everyone feel like they belonged. And yet, when his eyes fell on me, it wasn't just a glance. It was something deeper, something I wasn't used to. He walked up to me, smiled, and said, "You look lost. Want me to show you around?" I don't know why, but my heart skipped a beat. Not because he was handsome, though he was. Not because he was charming, though he was that too. But because in that moment I felt seen. truly seen. That had never happened before. He didn't treat me like I was invisible. He didn't look past me or through me. He looked at me like my presence mattered. We walked through the hallways together that day. He pointed out classrooms, the library, the courtyard where everyone hung out. But the whole time, I wasn't really paying attention to his words. I was just memorizing the sound of his voice, the way he laughed, the way he didn't make me feel like a stranger. That night, for the first time in years, I didn't write in my notebook about loneliness. I wrote about him, about Ethan, about how maybe, just maybe, life was giving me something I had always prayed for in silence. The days turned into weeks, and Ethan became the first real friend I had. We would sit together during lunch, share stories about our lives, laugh at silly jokes. He made the world feel lighter, less heavy, and slowly my walls began to crack. I found myself waiting for his texts, smiling when I saw him walking toward me, feeling my heart race whenever he said my name. It was terrifying because I knew what it meant. I was falling for him. And for someone like me, someone who had only ever known emptiness, the idea of love was both the most beautiful and the most dangerous thing I could imagine. They say you never forget the first time you fall in love. And maybe that's true, because even now, every detail of those days with Ethan is burned into my memory like sunlight on glass. Our friendship grew naturally, like it was always meant to be. He would save me a seat in class. He would share his lunch with me, even when I told him not to. He would notice little things, like when I hadn't slept well or when I was unusually quiet. No one had ever noticed me like that before. Sometimes we'd sit in the courtyard after school, just talking about life. He would tell me about his dreams, about wanting to travel, about wanting to build something of his own one day. I would listen, completely mesmerized, because his voice carried hope, and I had lived my whole life without it. One evening, we walked home together, and it started raining out of nowhere. Everyone else ran for cover, but Ethan just stretched out his arms, laughed, and let the rain soak him. I stood frozen, watching him, my heart pounding in my chest. And then he looked at me, his hair dripping, his smile wide, and said, "Come on, Isabella, live a little." I don't know why, but in that moment I wanted to. I wanted to live, not just exist. So I joined him, standing there in the pouring rain, laughing in a way I hadn't laughed in years. That night, when I got home drenched and shivering, I couldn't stop smiling. My mother scolded me for being careless, but I didn't care. Because for once, I wasn't invisible. For once, I felt alive. It wasn't long before my feelings became impossible to ignore. Every text from him made my heart race. Every time he brushed my hand accidentally, I felt electricity. Every laugh we shared carved his name deeper into my soul. But along with the joy came fear, a fear I couldn't shake. What if I wasn't enough? What if I was just another temporary part of his life? What if he saw me the way everyone else always had, as forgettable? I started writing about him in my notebook, pages and pages of words I could never say to his face. Words like, "You're the first person who makes me feel real." "I think I'm falling for you, Ethan." But I never gave him those pages. I kept them locked away, too afraid to let him see the truth. Because even though my heart was already his, I was terrified of what he would do if he knew. Love, I learned, doesn't always stay gentle. Sometimes it begins to ache long before it ends. Ethan was still the same warm, kind boy I had fallen for. But slowly, I started to notice the distance. Not in miles, but in moments. He was always busy now. Busy with projects, busy with new plans, busy chasing dreams that felt too big for the walls of our little city. And though he never said it outright, I could feel it. That invisible pull, dragging him towards something greater, something beyond me. One afternoon, we sat in the library together. He was scribbling ideas into his notebook, his eyes burning with excitement. He looked at me suddenly and said, "Bella, one day I'm going to leave this place. I don't want to be stuck here forever." I forced a smile, nodding, even though my chest tightened. Leave this place. Those words echoed inside me like a warning. Where would that leave me? I wanted to tell him everything in that moment. How I had fallen for him. How much he meant to me. How the thought of losing him already hurt more than anything I had ever known. But the words got stuck in my throat. Because what if he didn't feel the same? What if my confession only made the distance grow wider? So instead, I just said softly, "You're going to do amazing things, Ethan. I know it." And I meant it. I believed in him more than I had ever believed in anyone. But belief doesn't stop fear. That night, I stared at the blank ceiling of my room, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. For the first time since meeting him, the old loneliness crept back. The kind that whispered, "You'll lose him, just like you've lost everything else." The days that followed only deepened that fear. Ethan started hanging out with new groups of people who shared his energy, his passion, his hunger for more. They laughed loudly, dreamed wildly, and I just watched from the sidelines, trying not to notice how little space I seemed to take up in his world anymore. He was still kind, still gentle with me. But kindness isn't the same as closeness. And sometimes I felt like he was already halfway gone, like I was holding on to someone slipping slowly out of reach. One evening, when I finally gathered the courage to ask, "Do you ever think about the future?" He laughed and said, "Of course I do. I think about traveling, building something big, changing my life completely." I wanted to ask, "Do you think about me in that future?" But I didn't. Because deep down, I already knew the answer. And that silent answer broke me more than words ever could. They say you never forget the day your heart breaks. For me, it wasn't one single moment. It was 1,000 small cracks that built up until everything inside me shattered. Ethan had been distant for weeks. His texts became shorter, his laughter less frequent, his eyes always somewhere far away. But I kept telling myself it was just stress, just the weight of his dreams pressing down on him. Then came the night that proved me wrong. We were sitting at our favorite spot, a quiet corner near the park where we used to watch the sunset together. For a while, neither of us spoke. The silence felt heavier than usual, suffocating. Finally, he sighed and said softly, "Bella, I got accepted into a program abroad." I froze. My heart stopped. He kept talking about opportunities, about chasing dreams, about how this was everything he'd ever wanted. But all I could hear was the unspoken truth. He was leaving me behind. I wanted to scream, to beg him not to go, to tell him he was my whole world, that without him I would collapse back into the darkness I had barely escaped. But the words never came. My throat burned, my chest ached, and all I managed was a trembling whisper. "That's amazing, Ethan. I'm happy for you." Happy. What a cruel lie. He smiled at me then, a grateful, distant smile, like I was just a friend supporting his journey. Not the girl who cried for him at night, not the girl whose heart beat only for him. Just a friend. When I got home that night, I broke. I buried my face in my pillow and let the sobs tear through me until I couldn't breathe. My chest hurt so badly I thought it might split open. The days after were worse. He started spending less and less time with me. Our conversations became shallow, polite, empty, and I could feel it. That invisible thread between us snapping strand by strand. Then one afternoon, he said the words that finished me. "Bella, I don't think I can do this anymore. You're amazing, but my life is moving in a different direction. I don't want to hurt you by making promises I can't keep." I stared at him, my whole body numb, my heart screaming in silence. And then he hugged me. The kind of hug you give when you're saying goodbye, not when you're holding on. And just like that, he was gone. My world, once filled with light because of him, collapsed into pieces. I went home, shut my door, and cried until my voice broke. The emptiness that had lived inside me all my life came rushing back, bigger and darker than ever. Only this time, it wasn't just emptiness. It was grief. It was heartbreak. And it felt like it was going to kill me. After Ethan left, the world lost its colors. The sun still rose every morning, but it felt dimmer. The air still moved, but I couldn't breathe. Everything went on, except me. I stopped writing in my notebooks. The words wouldn't come. Every page I touched turned into a reminder of him, of his smile, his laughter, his promises left unspoken. I couldn't bear to see his name in ink, and yet it was all I could think about. Days blurred into nights. I would lie awake for hours staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment we had shared. The sound of his voice haunted me, the way he said my name, the way his eyes had once held mine. And every time my chest would tighten until tears spilled silently into my pillow. My friends, the few I had, tried to reach out. They told me I needed to move on, that I was young, that I had so much ahead of me. But what they didn't understand was this. Ethan wasn't just a boy I loved. He was the only light I had ever known. Losing him wasn't just heartbreak. It was losing myself. I stopped caring about school. I stopped eating properly. I stopped laughing. Sometimes I would catch my reflection in the mirror and not recognize the hollow eyes staring back at me. I looked like a ghost. And in many ways, I was one. A ghost of the girl I had once been. The girl he had brought to life. Nights were the worst. The silence screamed at me. The loneliness dug into my bones. There were times I pressed my hand against my chest, wondering how it was possible for a heart to hurt this much and still keep beating. Sometimes I imagined running to him, begging him to come back, to choose me. But then reality would crush me again. He had made his choice, and it wasn't me. So I kept drowning quietly, pretending in front of others that I was okay, smiling when I had to, nodding when people asked how I was. But inside, I was breaking, piece by piece. One evening, I found one of my old notebooks buried under my bed. Flipping through the pages, I saw the words of a girl who had once believed in love, who had once believed she mattered. That girl was gone now. I wrote only one sentence on the last page before closing it forever. I don't know how to live without him. And the truth was, I didn't. They say time heals all wounds. But what they don't tell you is that sometimes, time just teaches you how to hide the pain better. Months passed after Ethan left. The world didn't stop for me. People kept living, kept laughing, kept chasing their own dreams. And slowly, I learned how to blend in again. I started waking up earlier, forcing myself out of bed even when I didn't want to. I tried to eat, even when food tasted like nothing. I started journaling again, not about love this time, but about survival. About the small victories, like getting through a day without crying or going to class without breaking down in the bathroom. But the truth? The ache was still there. It was in the empty seat beside me in the cafeteria. It was in the silence of my phone that no longer buzzed with his messages. It was in every sunset I watched alone, remembering how we once watched them together. Sometimes I thought I was getting better. I would laugh with someone, or focus on a project, or listen to music without breaking apart. But then, something small would trigger me. A song we once loved, a place we once sat, or just the memory of his voice. And suddenly I was back at the beginning, drowning all over again. I learned how to wear masks. Around others, I smiled. I pretended I was fine. I said I had moved on. And people believed me. They said, "See, you're stronger now." But inside, I still carried him. Everywhere. Always. One night, I sat by my window watching the stars, and I whispered his name into the darkness. My voice cracked, tears spilling down my face. I hated myself for still missing him, for still loving him when he had walked away so easily. But love doesn't just vanish. It lingers, it clings, it scars you. And though I wanted to hate him, I couldn't. Because for a little while, he had given me something no one else ever had. The feeling that I mattered. So I kept moving forward step by painful step, carrying both the love and the loss inside me. Maybe healing isn't about forgetting. Maybe healing is about learning to live with the memory without letting it destroy you. They say every story has an ending, but the truth is, some stories don't end. They live inside you forever, carved into the deepest parts of who you are. Ethan was that story for me. It has been years now. The tears don't come as often anymore, but the ache, it still lingers, quiet and steady, like a scar beneath the skin. I've learned to live with it. I've learned to smile again, to laugh again, to breathe without feeling like the air is suffocating me. But even in my happiest moments, a part of me still remembers him. The boy who held my hand under the stars, the boy who taught me how to feel alive, and the boy who left me shattered in pieces. Sometimes late at night, I still whisper his name. Not out of love, not out of hope, but out of memory. Because forgetting him would mean forgetting the girl I once was. The girl who loved recklessly, vulnerably, completely. I don't hate him anymore. I don't think I ever truly could. But I no longer wait for him either. I've realized something. Heartbreak doesn't destroy you. It changes you. It strips you bare, shows you your weakest self, and then, slowly, painfully, it rebuilds you into someone new. I am not the same girl I was before Ethan. That girl was naive, full of fragile dreams. This version of me is different. Stronger, quieter, but also lonelier in ways I can't explain. And maybe that's okay. Because life isn't about holding on to the people who leave. It's about holding on to yourself when they do. Ethan's chapter in my life has closed. But the book, my book, is still being written. And if you ask me now what I've learned, I will tell you this. Through tears in my eyes and a voice that still trembles, love is beautiful. Love is cruel. And sometimes the greatest love story you ever have is the one you carry silently inside your broken heart.